My son-in-law tried to intimidate my lawyer. He picked the wrong man, but the very first warning didn't come in a courtroom or from a letter. It came from the ceiling fan above my kitchen table on a Sunday night in Charleston. Its slow, deliberate turning as if it were the only thing in the room that understood what was about to unfold. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It was November 25th, 2018. Late autumn light bled through the shutters, catching on the white trim Linda and I painted 20 years earlier. Dinner plates were scattered across the pine table, the smell of shrimp and grits still hanging in the air. My daughters, Megan and Lily, were laughing about something at work. My son-in-law Derek leaned back in his chair like a man surveying an opportunity. The ceiling fan clicked softly above him, slicing through the stillness. "You setch sitting on a gold mine, Ed," he said. "Just like that? No build-up, no small talk, not even a hint of tact." I laughed, because for 64 years I has been believed family didn't set need contracts. This house is a money pit, Derek. A century-old wood frame and a staircase that complains louder than my knees. He didn't set its smile. His eyes scanned the walls, the crown molding, the medallion above the fan. Market says otherwise. South of Broad set us exploding. You could clear 2 million, easy, if you know the right people. The way he said you like he meant we. Across the table, Samuel Tate, my lawyer and oldest friend, watched him in silence. Samuel doesn't need to raise his voice to make a point. 25 years as South Carolina's Attorney General taught him that silence, when held long enough, can be louder than a gavel. Derek barely acknowledged him. That was his first mistake. Megan raised an eyebrow. Lily gave Derek a sharp kick under the table. He grinned and reached for another biscuit like he hadn't just staked a claim on my home. Samuel finally spoke, his tone mild but precise. "Developers talk to you, Derek." Derek shrugged. "I hear things flipped a few condos in Mount Pleasant last year. Just saying, Edsep's sitting on serious value. Old houses need young money. This house isn't just lumber and nails. It's my late wife Linda's legacy. Built in 1894, it's where we raised our girls, where we danced barefoot in the kitchen after midnight, where Linda used to oil the banister every December like a prayer. She died suddenly in May 2017. Aneurysm. Quick. Cruel. After that, I kept the house alive the way she would have wanted. Oiled floors, swept piazza, rosemary by the windows. Her carpenter's pencil still sits in a jar by the phone, flat, red, with the wood worn smooth by her thumb. I mark the days with it now. I changed the subject to Megan's promotion at the bank and Lily's ceramics class. We laughed about a kiln mishap, but Derek wasn't listening. Under the table, his phone lit up with a text from Jared, investor. I caught the flash of the screen. His grin widened. Later, when the dishes were washed and the night air turned crisp, I stood at the sideboard and smoothed the edges of a grocery receipt with my thumb. $21.16 from Burbage's Market, pecans and butter for Linda's pie. November 25th, 2018. I slid it into the small drawer where I keep old paint swatches and family birthday notes. I didn't know why I saved it then, but every war has its first breadcrumb. The next morning, November 26th, I climbed the narrow stairs to Samuel's office above a bookstore on Queen Street. His window overlooks a stubborn palmetto that's survived more storms than Derek's ever read about. "Tell me the part you glossed over last night," he said, already flipping open his yellow legal pad. I told him about Derek's appraisal tone, about the investor text, about how the house wasn't just home, it was my retirement, Linda's legacy, and the last solid thing I owned outright. Samuel listened like he always does, head tilted, pen unmoving, weighing every detail. "You've got a will," he said finally. "Linda and I made one in 2010. The house goes to me, then split between the girls." He tapped the pad. "Wills are invitations to fights, probate cestus. Derek will enjoy. We such are not giving him a stage." He slid a thin blue folder across the desk. "We still build a trust, revocable. In your name as trustee. We deed the house into it, recorded at the Charleston County Register of Deeds. Anyone tries a stunt later, they hit a wall of law instead of you. Samuel, I don't want a war." "You stir not starting one," he said. You stir building a fence. We moved quickly. Wednesday, December 12th, 2018, I sat at Samuel's mahogany table while Mary Collins, the notary, cleared her throat before each page. I signed the trust instrument in black ink, one deliberate stroke at a time. Trustee accepts, Samuel murmured, guiding me through it. He had already prepared the deed. Lot 12, Block C, Charleston Village. We walked the papers to the courthouse. Clerk knew Samuel by name. Recording fee, $25 cash. The machine ate my first bill. I fished out a crumpled 5 like it was fate testing me. The clerk handed me the stamped receipt, and I tucked it into my shirt pocket like a medal. Friday, December 14th, under the same ceiling fan, I assembled my little packet: trust copy, deed copy, receipt, my handwritten note, house recorded into trust December 14th, 18, book page pending. I locked it in Linda's fireproof box behind the $10 cashier's check we used to open the trust account at Wells Fargo, ending in 4172. It felt like laying a cornerstone. I didn't tell the girls, not yet. I convinced myself it was to keep Christmas peaceful. The truth? I was still clinging to that old belief that family didn't need legal fences. 2 days later, Sunday, December 16th, Derek showed up alone with a six-pack he didn't open. He stood in the doorway like a man measuring curtains for a house he hadn't bought yet. "You talked to anyone about what we discussed?" he asked. "I talked to a lot of people," I said. "I could place this house in 24 hours, he said. "You be set for life." "I'm already set," I answered. And he heard the steel in my voice. He smiled, a thin, calculating thing. "Old houses need young money," he repeated. I watched him walk away through the piazza curtains. He didn't go straight to his car. He wandered around the side yard, peering up at the second-story windows, stepping through Linda's rosemary beds without noticing. That night, I sat at the table with Linda's pencil and drew a small red X on December 16th on my bank calendar. Underlined November 25th and December 14th. Wrote trust recorded in block letters. The fan ticked once, then hummed smoothly, as if acknowledging what had just begun. On December 17th, Samuel called. "Deerwood Thep's showing," he said. "Book 6417, page 203. Anyone tries to mess with your title now, they will find a fence." I wanted to believe him. But that night, as the house creaked and settled, I remembered Derek stepping into the rosemary. I remembered his voice low on the piazza a few weeks earlier, talking to Jared on the phone when he thought I wasn't listening. "Yeah," he said. He sat soft. The ceiling fan turned overhead, and for the first time in a long time I started listening. I used to think the sound of keys in a bowl meant home. In 2019, that sound started to mean something else, something I didn't catch soon enough. June 6th, 2019, a Thursday. Charleston was already sticky with summer. Lily stopped by that afternoon, fresh from a pottery class, clay still under her nails. She was smiling the way people do when they don't know they're delivering a loaded weapon. "I gave Derek the spare key," she said, dropping her sunglasses into the key bowl by the back door. My stomach tightened. "For what?" "For the painter," she said. "He sep's gonna get quotes while we scepter at work. You said the upstairs bathroom needed touch-ups." I had mentioned the peeling paint near the skylight weeks earlier. I hadn't hired anyone. Derek hadn't asked. "Which key?" I asked slowly. "The brass one with the little nick," she said, pointing. "The spare house key, Linda's old one." I told myself not to overreact. It was family, just paint. But that key never came back. I marked it in my notebook that night. June 6th. Lily gave Derek spare key, painter. A tiny line in my carpentry pencil. The fan above the kitchen table turned slowly, listening. The months rolled on quietly, but Derek's silence grew louder. Late 2019, his real estate projects started unraveling. He'd leveraged everything chasing fast money. Mount Pleasant condos, a half-developed strip mall in Goose Creek, a disastrous waterfront deal that stalled after the bank pulled financing. I didn't know the details then, but I felt it in the way he started circling the house like a hawk. He sipped, dropped casual remarks at family dinners. "You know, Ed, developers are still sniffing around this neighborhood. The market sits insane. Or property taxes on a place like this must be brutal. Or worse, to Lily when he thought I wasn't set listening. Your dad doesn't set even use half these rooms. Thanksgiving 2019. He arrived early. Too early. The pie wasn't even in the oven. I found him upstairs in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, standing outside the guest room. He jumped when he saw me. Cell service, he said, grinning too wide. Better up here. But there was no reception dead zone in my house. I built this place to withstand hurricanes. I know every creak, every quirk. That was the hallway Linda painted herself in 1995, singing Motown. There was no reason for him to be there. January 14th, 2020, Tuesday night. A folded invoice appeared on my kitchen counter while I was out back trimming the azaleas. A consulting fee for $2,800, dated January 9th. Derek's LLC header. No service description. I stood at the counter, staring at it. The winter light flat and cold. The ceiling fan clicked 3 times before settling into its rhythm. I slipped the invoice into my drawer, underlining the date in red pencil. I didn't say a word. That silence gave him room. Throughout 2020, little anomalies piled up. The key bowl shifted, literally, keys moved when no one should have touched them. One evening in April, I returned from a walk and found the brass key lying outside the bowl on the sideboard. Lily swore she hadn't been by. Megan hadn't visited in weeks. Derek had been running errands. June 18th, 2020, Friday, 7:42 p.m. I wrote it down because I'd had enough weirdness to start treating it like evidence. I came home to find the side gate unlatched. Derek's black Tahoe was parked 2 houses down, engine still warm. I watched from behind the shutters as he came up my driveway, phone pressed to his ear, laughing. He stopped beneath the kitchen window, looked up at the fan's shadow spinning slowly, then walked back to his car. He didn't knock, he didn't call, he just checked. Meanwhile, his desperation was quietly growing teeth. Megan, working at First Citizens Bank downtown, mentioned offhand that Derek had been asking around about home equity leverage and bridge financing. She thought he was fishing for his next flip. She didn't realize the house he was circling was mine. I tried to keep peace. Linda used to say, "Ed, don't start fires unless you're ready to put them out." So I stayed quiet. At Sunday dinners, I ignored his comments. When Lily said, "He's just trying to help," I nodded and changed the subject. But at night, sitting alone under that ceiling fan, I started making lists. Dates, keys, cars, invoices. A pattern was forming, quiet, like water under floorboards. October 2020. I was repairing a loose shutter hinge on the piazza when I overheard Derek on his phone near the street. "I am telling you, the old man Sips got no idea," he said, laughing. "He Sips sitting on the cleanest title in the neighborhood. Trust or no trust. Their Sips ways in, just need the right leverage." He didn't know I was 10 feet away behind the jasmine vines. My hand tightened on the screwdriver until my knuckles ached. I didn't say a word. I marked the date in my ledger later that night, October 19th, 20. Derek phone call, leverage comment. December 23rd, 2020. Wednesday, Charleston was damp and cold, the kind of winter that settles in your bones. Lily and Derek came by to drop off gifts. As they left, I caught a glimpse of a folder poking out of Derek's coat pocket. County clerk letterhead, unmistakable green seal. He noticed my eyes, shifted it deeper, and laughed nervously. "Just paperwork," he said. "Nothing exciting." I didn't push. I should have. Looking back, 2019 and 2020 were the years when the cracks formed, not big ones. Hairlines, keys, invoices, overheard calls. But those hairlines run deep in old houses, and deeper still in families that trust too easily. The fan kept turning. The key bowl kept filling and emptying. Derek kept circling, and I, still grieving, still clinging to peace, kept silent. I thought silence would protect Linda's house. I didn't realize it was inviting the storm in. The first time I saw the forged document, it was lying on my kitchen island like a rattlesnake, still, but waiting to strike. March 3rd, 2021, Wednesday. Late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, lighting the polished wood in strips. Derek stood opposite me in that smug gray blazer he always wore when he was trying to look like he belonged in a boardroom. He slid the folder forward slowly, like he was doing me a favor. "Take a look at this," he said. I opened it. My eyes caught the header first. Loan agreement, $400,000. My name printed neatly. My signature scrawled at the bottom, except it wasn't mine. "This is some kind of joke," I said. He leaned on the island, pretending to be casual. "Come on, Ed. We talked about leveraging the property. You must have forgotten." I hadn't forgotten, because it had never happened. My real signature has a carpenter's curl in the sea of coal, learned from decades of signing lumber invoices. This one had a stiff angle, like someone had traced it from a photocopy. He'd even tried to fake the little cross-stroke flourish Linda used to tease me about. "This isn't set my signature," I said flatly. He shrugged. "Well, the bank thinks it is. Paperwork SIPT is already moving. Just a bridge loan secured against the property. Nothing you need to worry about. You still be set once the redevelopment deal closes." He said red development like he was already holding the check. The house was quiet, except for the ceiling fan overhead, turning slowly. I could feel Linda's absence like a draft through the walls. "Derek," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I never signed this. You start playing with fire." He smiled, slow and slippery. "Come on, Ed. You spur not going to make a scene. We spur family. I spurb just trying to help you unlock the value sitting in these walls. You spurred not exactly using the capital." He tapped the papers with 2 fingers. "And besides, it's sets already filed." He left shortly after, acting like nothing was wrong. When the door shut, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the folder. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something older. Betrayal hits slower when it comes from inside the family. I opened my fireproof box. Trust papers, deed copies, receipts. I laid everything out like I was building a case file. On a blank sheet, I wrote, March 3rd, 2021. Direct delivered forged loan agreement, $400,000. Underlined twice. Red carpenter sips pencil. Then I picked up the phone and called Samuel. Dawn set. Confront him. Samuel said that night. His voice was calm, like always. "Build." "Build what?" I asked. "A record. A timeline. You steer a builder, Ed. Build the case before the house catches fire." The fan above me ticked once, then hummed steadily. The next few months were a blur of legal shadows. March bled into April, April into May. Derek grew bolder, strutting through family dinners like nothing had happened, sometimes even making jokes about old money and sleeping equity. Lily didn't see it, Megan did. She'd lean toward me during dessert, whispering, "Something's off, Dad. He's nervous." She was right. June 21st, 2021, Monday morning. I walked out to the mailbox and found an envelope from the Charleston County Clerk's office. Thin, official, green seal. Inside, notice of interest filed against the property. Submitted by Derek Morgan, dated June 15th. He'd officially lodged a claim against my house, citing a loan secured by property deed referencing the forged agreement. I stood in my driveway holding that letter. The summer heat thick enough to taste. Across the street, Mrs. Langley was watering her hydrangeas. Derek's black Tahoe drove by slowly. He honked and waved. Inside the house, I snapped Linda's carpenter's pencil clean in half. That night, I called Samuel again. "He filed a notice of interest," I said. "Good," Samuel replied. "Good?" I almost laughed. "Because now he's made his move on paper," he said. "Paper leaves fingerprints. We settle trace every one." That week, Samuel and I started methodically laying bricks for the wall that would eventually close around Derek. First, we pulled the original trust deed, confirmed recording book 6417, page 203. Second, we drafted a response timeline. Derek's forged agreement, March 3rd, clerk filing June 15th, notice arrival June 21st. Samuel had me print everything twice and store one copy at his office. "Ed," he said, during one late meeting. Ceiling fan whirring above us, I dealt with cartel lawyers, Ponzi schemers, and crooked developers. Derek Sepp's amateur hour. But amateur hour gets dangerous when families don tasked act. And acting, I said quietly. Yes, he said, you are. July brought subtler changes. I started locking the office drawers. I bought a small audio recorder and kept it in my shirt pocket. I checked the key bowl twice a day. I began writing dates on the inside of cabinet doors with the carpenter's pencil, hidden notes for myself. Derek noticed the shift. One evening at a family barbecue, he cornered me near the grill. You've been quiet lately, he said, smile sharp. Just listening, I replied. He laughed, but there was a flicker in his eyes, like he'd just realized I wasn't as soft as he thought. By August, Lily finally caught the edge of the truth. She overheard him on the phone late one night in their kitchen. Once it's Sepp's refinanced, he can Sepp do anything, Derek said. The paperwork Sepp's already in play. Trust or no trust. She told me 2 days later, voice shaking. Dad, what's Sempsey talking about? I didn't give her details. Not yet. She was still tangled between love and disbelief. But something shifted between us that day. She stopped defending him so quickly. Every night I sat alone at the kitchen table. Fan humming, key bowl glinting in the low light, piles of documents spread like puzzle pieces. For decades, I'd built houses by listening to the creak of beams, the tension in nails, the whisper of wood settling. Now I was listening to my family unravel. March 3rd had been the match. June 21st was the spark. The fire was coming. But this time, I wasn't just going to watch it burn. I was building something stronger. The house started to change that summer. It wasn't just the heat settling in over Charleston, or the thunderstorms rattling the shutters at night. It was something quieter, heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something. July melted into August 2021, and the nights grew longer. I'd sit in the study with the fan humming overhead, staring at the same walls Linda painted 20 years earlier. Every corner of that house held a memory, but now they also held a threat. Derek's forged loan agreement was filed, his notice of interest stamped and sitting in my drawer like a ticking bomb, and my silence once my shield was starting to crack. August 12th, 2021. Thursday evening, Megan came by after work. She still wore her First Citizens Bank ID clipped to her blazer. She dropped her bag by the hall tree, walked straight to the study, and placed a stack of mail on my desk. Dad, she said softly, I think you need to see this. The envelopes were in set bank statements. They were letters, plain white, no return address. The first one started simply, You start making this harder than it needs to be. The second, The trust doesn't protect you forever. The third was worse. Your daughters will thank me when this is over. All typed, all unsigned, postmarked locally. I looked up at Megan. Her jaw was clenched. How long have these been coming? I found them under the sideboard, she said. He must have slipped them in when you weren't set home. The idea of Derek stepping into my house, quietly depositing threats like poison candy, made my skin crawl. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Her voice cracked, because I didn't want to believe it. That night, after Megan left, I sat at the kitchen table. The fan clicked softly, each sound like a metronome marking time I couldn't get back. I spread the letters out under the light, studied the fonts, the margins, the postmarks. Each detail was another nail in the structure he was building around me. I opened my ledger and wrote in red pencil, August 12th, 2021. Threat letters 3, postmarked Charleston. I underlined it twice. My silence had given him room to maneuver, and now he was using that room to push harder. August 17th, 2021, Tuesday. Lily came by unexpectedly, pale and shaken. She'd overheard Derek on a late-night call. He was in the kitchen, she said, clutching her mug. He thought I was asleep. He told someone, Seer, he Sepp's going to fold. Old men always fold. Once the pressure hits, he Sepp sell or die, and either way we Sepps are in. Her voice cracked on die. I stared at her, unsure what hurt more, what Derek had said, or the way she'd finally heard it for herself. Dad, why didn't you tell me any of this? because silence had felt safer than war. But in that moment, looking at my youngest daughter, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The man who married into my family had declared war months ago. I'd just been pretending not to notice. That night, I sat at my desk, turned the fan on low, and pulled out Linda's carpenter's pencil. The weight of it in my hand was grounding. I flipped through my ledger keys, invoices, forged documents, clerk filings, overheard calls, now threats. For months I'd been marking incidents like I was taking notes on a storm. But a storm doesn't wait for your permission to land. I drew a firm red line under the last entry. Then I made a new one, dated August 17th, 2021. Called Carla Ruiz, private investigator. Carla Ruiz was a name Samuel had mentioned in passing years earlier, former insurance fraud investigator. Sharp as a tack. Knew Charleston's property scene better than anyone. She picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice crisp. "Samuel Tate gave me your number once upon a time. If you set calling me, something set's gone sideways." I told her everything. Not in one breath, but carefully, piece by piece. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a brief pause. "Good news is," she said, "he said's sloppy. Men like Derek always are. You said to have been documenting, which gives me something to work with. But from this point forward, we do this smart. Quiet, controlled. You don't tip your hand until we have a complete picture." "I spent my life building houses," I said quietly. "I can build a case." She chuckled. "Then let's lay the foundation." The following weeks felt different. I started noticing things I'd ignored before: the subtle creaks in the hallway, the way Derek's Tahoe lingered on the street longer than usual, the pattern of his text messages to Lily when he thought I wasn't around. September crept closer, and my house no longer felt like just my home. It felt like a battleground where every key, every receipt, every overheard call was a potential weapon. One evening, near the end of August, I stood in the doorway of the study watching the ceiling fan turn lazily above me. For 6 years that fan had been a quiet companion after Linda died. Now it felt like a sentry watching, recording. "All right," I said aloud. Voice low, steady. No more silence. The walls didn't answer, but the air shifted. That was the night Edwin Cole stopped waiting. That was the night the builder in me woke up. And Derek Morgan? He had no idea that the house he was circling had just started circling him back. By 2022, the storm wasn't looming anymore. It was here, quiet, relentless, soaking into the foundation like Charleston's winter rain. But I'd stopped pretending it wasn't happening. With Samuel's legal precision and Carla's investigative instincts, we began digging trenches, not just to hold our ground, but to pull Derek's scheme apart piece by piece. January 19th, 2022. Wednesday morning, Carla met me at a small diner off Savannah Highway. She wore a navy trench coat and carried a leather folder stuffed with papers. No small talk. She opened with, "He seeps sloppier than I expected." She laid out her findings like blueprints. Derek had set up 3 LLCs over the past 2 years. Morgan Redevelopment Group, LLC. Incorporated February 2020. Harbor Equity Ventures, LLC. April 2021. Low Country Holdings, LLC, August 2021. All 3 registered to the same UPS store mailbox on King Street. All 3 listed Derek as managing member. None had legitimate assets. She slid bank transaction records across the table. "Shell games," she said. "Money going in from short-term private loans, money immediately siphoned out into personal accounts and fake contractor invoices." There was one line that caught my eye. June 30th, 2021, $699,842. Transferred from a private lender to Harbor Equity Ventures, LLC. 2 days later, $695,000 of it moved again, split between Derek's personal account and 2 unknown recipients. "That's nearly 700 grand, I murmured. "Borrowed against phantom deals?" Carla replied, "He sists drowning, Mr. Cole. And your house is the lifeboat he sists trying to climb onto." February through summer of 2022, the investigation became my new routine. Carla subpoenaed contractor records. traced IP addresses on Derek's emails, pulled county filings. Samuel worked quietly, filing protective notices, reinforcing the trust's defenses, drafting motions he'd hold until the right moment. I learned to keep meticulous copies of everything: receipts, clerk stamps, emails, voice memos. I kept a three-ring binder with red dividers labeled KEYs: bank, legal, threats, evidence. The carpenter's pencil became my weapon. Every line I drew on that ledger a strike back. September 10th, 2022. Saturday morning, the locks changed. I hired a local locksmith, a man named Gerald who'd worked on Charleston homes for 30 years. He knew how to fit new deadbolts into antique frames without splintering the wood. We walked the perimeter together: front door, back door, study, and garage. When he finished, I held the old keys in my palm, cold, heavy, worn by decades of daily use. Linda's brass spare, Megan's copy, Lily's, and the one Derek had quietly taken. One by one, I dropped them into the key bowl by the back door. They clinked together like pieces of evidence falling into place. For the first time in months, I felt the house exhale. Carla was relentless. By late 2022, she'd uncovered a paper trail that read like a cheap crime novel: fake invoices from non-existent subcontractors, inflated appraisals, and late-night emails between Derek and a mortgage broker trying to structure bridge financing using my property as collateral. She found the emails because Derek was careless. He used Lily's old iPad, synced to their shared cloud, to check his accounts. Lily had stopped defending him by then. She gave Carla access. The timeline was damning. Meanwhile, Samuel filed a lis pendens on the property in Charleston County Court, a formal notice of pending legal action. It froze any potential transaction Derek might attempt using the forged loan documents. It was a legal tripwire. Once he tries to move, he'll trigger it, Samuel said, adjusting his glasses. He doesn't set even realize the hole he sets is digging. Spring 2023 arrived with azaleas blooming pink and white along the piazza railings, but inside the house everything was strategy. My study transformed into a war room. Maps of Derek's LLC structure were pinned to corkboards. Carla's reports were stacked in neat piles. Samuel's legal drafts filled the bottom drawers. March 8th, 2023. Wednesday, Derek made his first real mistake. He marched into Samuel's downtown office unannounced, trying to intimidate him. Carla wasn't there, but Samuel later recounted it to me word for word. Derek leaned across the conference table, trying that same swagger he'd used in my kitchen years earlier. "You set her out of your league, old man," Derek said. "You can stop what setup's already in motion." Samuel leaned back, hands folded, perfectly calm. "Son," he said, "ISEF had cartel lawyers try scarier lines than that. You don't stat qualify." Derek didn't know it, but his little display gave us something priceless. Times, Samuel said, he saw desperation in Derek's eyes, the kind that makes people sloppy. Carla capitalized on that sloppiness. She secured affidavits from contractors. Derek had allegedly paid for work on my property. Every single one denied ever setting foot on my land. One even laughed. "I don't work south of Broad," he said. "That guy tried to get me to sign blank invoices. I told him to shove it." Piece by piece, Derek's house of cards was becoming visible. I'll never forget the night I closed the study door after Carla left with a folder under her arm. It was late April 2023. The fan in the hallway was humming softly. I stood by the key bowl and ran my fingers through the new set of keys. My keys, no spares floating around. No hidden access points. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. I looked at the wall calendar Linda had kept in the kitchen. December 2018 was still faintly circled in red when we recorded the trust. I added a new mark under April 2023. Trenches dug. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a siege. And Derek didn't realize he was already surrounded. By summer 2023, everything was set. The legal traps were in place, the evidence trail was airtight, and Derek was running out of moves. He thought he was circling prey. He didn't see the walls closing around him. Carla had a saying she liked to repeat whenever she found a new weak spot in Derek Sepp's scheme: Foundation looks solid, but one kick and the whole thing comes down. She was right. The foundation of Derek's fraud was cracked, and all we had to do now was wait for him to make the next mistake. March 8th, 2023 started like any other Wednesday, cold morning air drifting off the harbor, the smell of coffee in the kitchen, the ceiling fan turning slowly as if rehearsing for some unseen moment. By lunchtime, Derek Morgan would make the single worst strategic decision of his life. He walked straight into Samuel Tate's office and tried to intimidate the wrong man. I wasn't there in person, but I've heard the story so many times, first from Samuel that evening, then again in court depositions, that I can see it clearly like a scene in a film I've memorized. Samuel's office sits on the second floor of a renovated brick building downtown, overlooking Queen Street. The window shutters creak when the wind picks up, and there's always the faint scent of old law books and lemon oil. The ceiling fan in his conference room ironically looks just like the one in my kitchen, white blades, slow turn, the kind of sound that fills silences instead of breaking them. Derek showed up without an appointment. He wore that same gray blazer, but this time it was wrinkled, sweat blooming faintly under the arms. His shoes were expensive but scuffed. Carla's timeline had shown us what Derek's finances looked like by then. 3 LLCs bleeding cash, private loans past due, one bridge lender threatening default if he didn't come up with collateral by summer. He needed my house like a drowning man needs air. Samuel Sepp's assistant tried to stall him, but Derek pushed through, opening the door like he owned the place. Samuel didn't Sepp stand. He simply looked up from his legal pad and said, "Mr. Morgan, you don't Sepp's have an appointment." Derek ignored that. He closed the door behind him and stalked toward the conference table. "We need to talk," he said, voice sharp. Samuel gestured toward a chair with the kind of composure that can only come from years of watching people make fools of themselves in courtrooms. Derek sat, leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You think you can box me out?" Derek started. "I know what you said are doing. List pendants, subpoenas, digging around in my business. You said are trying to scare me off. That's not going to work." Samuel set his pen down carefully. "No," he said. I'm not trying to scare you. I said of simply documenting facts." Derek smirked. "Facts? You think a couple of old men can keep me from getting what Sepp's mine?" Samuel leaned back in his chair, folding his hands loosely in front of him. "Son," he said evenly, "I Sepp had cartel lawyers try scarier lines than that. You don't set qualify." There it was. The line that would echo in my head for months. Derek blinked, thrown off by the calmness. He'd expected bluster. He got strategy instead. "You have no idea what you're up against," Derek snapped. Samuel tilted his head. "Neither do you." That afternoon, Samuel called me. His voice carried a note I hadn't as it heard in years' satisfaction. He showed his hand, Samuel said. "He sips under pressure. The intimidation stunt was sips about me. It was about buying time." "Time for what?" I asked. "To find another way around the fence we built," he replied. "But the way he stormed in here, he gave us more than he took." "What do you mean?" Samuel paused, papers rustling in the background. He confirmed he knows about the subpoenas. "That means he sits either been tipped off, or he sits desperate enough to be watching county filings like a hawk. Either way, it tells me where to tighten the net." That night, I added a new line to my ledger. March 8th, 2023. Derek attempts to intimidate Samuel. Failure. Underlined twice. Red pencil. In the weeks following Derek's failed intimidation attempt, everything accelerated. Carla doubled her efforts on the financial side. She followed wire transfers, subpoenaed brokerage accounts, and tracked Derek's mounting debt like a bloodhound. What she uncovered made the forged loan agreement look like child's play. March 23rd, 2023. Harbor Equity Ventures received a $210,000 loan from a private lender in Colombia. By April 3rd, $207,000 had been transferred out to Derek's personal checking account, then dispersed in chunks of $5,000 and $10,000 to various contractors with P.O. boxes. 2 of those addresses traced back to storage units Derek had rented in North Charleston. Classic money shuffle. Meanwhile, Samuel prepared our legal offensive quietly. He updated the list pendants, strengthened the trust defense, and filed notice of intent to contest any future liens. "We stir boxing him in," he told me, during a meeting at his office. "Every door he tries will lock behind him." I remember sitting there in his conference room, the fan humming overhead, and realizing something that surprised me. I wasn't nervous anymore. For years, Derek had moved while I reacted. But now we were ahead. The trenches were dug. The paperwork was flawless. His desperation had turned from threat to liability. Lily noticed the shift too. Around late March, she came by one evening, eyes tired but clearer than they'd been in months. She'd stopped defending Derek openly after overhearing his late-night conversations. But this was different. She sat at the kitchen table, tracing her finger along the grain of the wood. "He keeps unraveling," she said quietly. "He keeps pacing at night, talking to lenders. I think he's starting to realize you are not folding." The ceiling fan turned overhead, steady and patient. "Good," I said simply. "Let him feel the walls." She looked at me then, not like a daughter looking at her father, but like a woman finally seeing the truth about her husband. "Dad," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You hear the storm when you hear it," I said, "not before." By early summer 2023, Derek's attempt to intimidate Samuel had backfired completely. Instead of scaring us off, he'd handed us insight into his panic. Carla tightened the investigative noose. Samuel tightened the legal one, and me? I finally understood that this wasn't just about protecting the house anymore. It was about reclaiming control. Derek thought he was walking into Samuel's office to flex his power. What he actually did was tell us exactly how close he was to breaking. He'd picked the wrong man to threaten, and in doing so he gave us the one thing we needed most: leverage. The ceiling fan hummed softly that night as I locked the study door. For the first time I felt the tide turning. This wasn't his game anymore, it was mine. October 2023 arrived like a slow drum roll. The Charleston air was cooler, the sky shifting to that pale autumn blue that makes the harbor shimmer. But inside my house, everything was tightening. The paperwork, the legal traps, the family fault lines. After years of Derek circling my life like a vulture, the web was finally tightening around him. It started on October 4th, 2023, a Wednesday morning. Samuel called me just after sunrise, his voice carrying that deliberate calm he only used when big moves were in play. "It's Setzer's time," he said. "We set your filing for the TRO and the motion to expunge." "TRO?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Temporary restraining order," Samuel explained. "We freeze any further attempts to touch the property title and start the process to wipe that forged loan notice off the record permanently. This is the first real public strike." I looked out at the backyard, at the oak tree Linda planted in '89, at the shadows falling across the porch steps. I'd waited years for this moment. "Do it," I said. Samuel filed both motions that afternoon, the TRO and the motion to expunge Derek's notice of interest. The filings were dense. 27 pages of trust documents, clerk stamps, affidavits, and financial timelines that Carla had spent months assembling. I read every word that night under the kitchen fan, tracing dates with my carpenter's pencil like a general memorizing a battle plan. Derek didn't know it yet, but the legal ground beneath his feet had just started to shift. By mid-October, the Charleston County Circuit Court set a hearing date for November 12, 2024. A full courtroom showdown was coming. Samuel and Carla worked late nights preparing exhibits, subpoenaing records, and locking down testimony from contractors Derek had falsified invoices from. Meanwhile, Derek grew careless. Carla picked up a new thread in his email traffic. He started bragging to potential investors again, claiming the deal was locked and the old man can stop what's coming. The irony was, by then everything was locked. But not the way he thought. January 9th, 2024. A cold Tuesday morning, the preliminary injunction was granted. Derek's accounts were frozen. Carla and Samuel were both at the courthouse when the judge signed the order. Samuel called me from the steps outside, the wind whipping through the phone. "It's done," he said. "His financial runway just ended." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the key bowl. The house was silent, except for the fan above, turning slow and steady. I'd waited almost 6 years for this sound. Not fear, not confusion, but stillness. Good, I said. Let him feel it. Carla didn't stop there. She subpoenaed Derek's employer records and email archives. What she found was devastating. By February 2024, she'd obtained internal emails Derek had doctored, faking contractor approvals, misrepresenting bank communications, even forging e-signatures from people who'd never met him. One particularly damning email thread showed Derek trying to restructure the supposed loan using a secondary lender in Atlanta. The lender had flagged the inconsistencies, and Derek had tried to bluff through it. Carla printed those emails out and brought them to my house. One rainy afternoon, she laid them across the dining table, like evidence in a crime thriller. He sets cooked, she said simply. These aren't sets just civil fraud issues anymore. We sets are looking at potential criminal exposure. I stared down at the pages. There it was in black and white, years of deception crystallized into proof. Samuel Sepsa's already preparing to refer it to the solicitor Sepsa's office once the injunction sticks. Carla added, we Seps are going to end this properly. The biggest turn came not in court, but at home. It was March 14th, 2024, a Thursday night. Lily showed up at my door at 10:17 p.m., soaked from the rain. Her hands were trembling. Dad, she whispered, I need to talk to you. We sat in the kitchen. She stared at the fan as it turned above us, slow and hypnotic. Then the words tumbled out. She'd overheard Derek that evening, bragging on a call to one of his so-called investors. He'd been drinking, careless. She'd caught every word from the hallway. He said, the idiot still thinks he sips safe behind that trust. He doesn't set know the endgame. By the time this hits court, I said'll already have what I need. She looked at me then, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I was blind. The sentence hung in the air like a confession. Neither of us could escape. For years she'd defended him, believed his half-truths, excused his behavior. But now, hearing him gloat about destroying her family home, it shattered something inside her. I reached across the table, took her hand gently, and looked toward the key bowl by the door. Not anymore, I said. From that night forward, Lily became an unexpected ally. She started combing through old files, forwarding Carla screenshots of suspicious transactions Derek had made using their joint account. She even retrieved a thumb drive Derek had hidden in their home office, filled with draft contracts, fake invoices, and notes about potential legal angles he planned to exploit against me. Carla called it a treasure chest. Samuel called it Exhibit Gold. I called it justice, finally waking up. The weeks leading up to trial were a strange kind of quiet. I'd walk through the house late at night, the fan whispering above, the oak tree outside casting long shadows across the porch. For 6 years I'd avoided conflict. I'd tried to protect Linda's house by pretending family meant safety. Derek had used that silence like a crowbar, but now the silence was different. It was focused, coiled. On the eve of trial, November 11th, 2024, I sat alone in the study, lights low, legal binders stacked neatly on the desk. Samuel and Carla had done their work. Lily and Megan were both fully on my side. The trust was fortified. The paper trail was airtight. The court date was set. I thought back to the dinner in 2018, when Derek casually told me I was sitting on a gold mine under that same fan. I remembered laughing. I remembered trusting. I remembered not seeing the trap slowly being built around me. But the man sitting in that study on the night before trial wasn't the same man who laughed in 2018. He was sharper, quieter, patient. I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Derek should have been. Somewhere down the street, a car engine started and faded. The night was still. The ceiling fan turned overhead, a steady sentinel. For 6 long years, I'd watched Derek circle my family's legacy, picking at it like a thief who believed he was smarter than the people who built the walls. Tomorrow, those walls would speak. Tomorrow, Charleston's courthouse would hear exactly who Derek Morgan really was. November 12th, 2024, Charleston County Courthouse. The sky was clear, brittle blue, the kind that makes old brick look sharper. I stood on the courthouse steps at 8:47 a.m., hands in my coat pockets, feeling the weight of 6 years settle onto my shoulders like a final beam being lowered into place. The courthouse doors loomed tall, their varnish shining in the morning light. Inside, history waited of betrayals documented, lies dismantled, and justice sharpened like a chisel. Derek arrived at 9:03 sharp. He climbed the courthouse steps like he was walking a red carpet. Gray blazer perfectly pressed, shoes polished to a glare. He had that grin again, the one that had appeared at my kitchen table 6 years earlier when he called my home a gold mine. Behind him trailed his attorney, a local real estate litigator named Warren Finch. I knew the man. Charleston's legal world is small. Finch was slick, experienced with property disputes, but he wasn't ready for Samuel Tate. Samuel was already inside, seated at the plaintiff's table in courtroom 3B, tie straight, glasses polished, his old leather briefcase on the floor beside him. Carla was there too, organized to the last paperclip, her evidence binders stacked in color-coded precision. Megan sat behind me, jaw clenched. Lily arrived moments later, clutching a folder with her thumb drive evidence. She looked determined. When Derek saw me across the hallway, he smirked and nodded, like we were about to negotiate over a poker game. He still didn't understand this wasn't a game anymore. This was demolition day. The courtroom itself was old, echoing, with ceiling fans humming slowly above the spectators' benches. I swear they sounded exactly like the fan in my kitchen, steady, patient, listening. The judge entered at 9:30. A tall woman in her early 60s, sharp eyes, known for cutting through nonsense like a saw through pine. She glanced at the docket and said, "Let's begin." Samuel rose first. His voice filled the room with the deliberate weight of someone who'd spent a lifetime in courtrooms. "Your Honor," he began, "this case concerns the unlawful filing of a notice of interest, forged loan documents, and a systematic attempt to defraud my client, Edwin Cole, out of his legally protected property." He gestured toward the evidence binders. "What began as family trust has been twisted into a calculated fraud. Today we will unwind that fraud piece by piece." Finch countered with the expected bluster. "Your Honor, this is a family dispute blown out of proportion. My client Derek Morgan simply pursued legitimate investment opportunities with the understanding that Mr. Cole intended to liquidate his property. There were verbal agreements. Verbal agreements do not override trust deeds, Mr. Finch." The judge cut in, her tone flat as a hammer strike. Finch's smile faltered. Then came the evidence. Samuel started with the trust deed, recorded December 14, 2018. He walked the judge through each step: the living trust, the recording book and page number, the legal description, the trustee designation. Carla displayed the deed on the courtroom projector, highlighting the book 6417, page 203 notation in crisp detail. Then came the forged loan agreement, dated March 3, 2021. Samuel had a handwriting expert testify remotely, explaining the differences between my signature and the forgery: stroke pressure, letter formation, microscopic breaks that occur when someone traces. Derek tried to keep his expression neutral, but his jaw tightened visibly. The next blow was financial. Carla took the stand as an expert investigator, her testimony methodical and devastating. She outlined Derek's 3 LLCs, the shell transfers, and most damning of all, the June 30th, 2021 transfer of $699,842 through Harbor Equity Ventures. She explained how the money was funneled into Derek's personal accounts and used to prop up failing ventures, not to fund any legitimate property improvements. She spoke calmly, like she practiced dismantling fraud for breakfast. Finch tried to trip her up with procedural questions, but Carla was unshakable. "Mr. Finch," she said at one point, "your client left a clearer trail than he seems to realize. Sloppy fraud is still fraud." Then came the contractors. A local painter, a wiry man with sun-browned arms, testified that Derek had approached him in 2021, asking him to sign blank invoices in exchange for quick cash. "I told him no," the man said, shrugging. "I don't set work south of Broad." and I sure don't set sign ghosts. Two more contractors followed, both confirming they'd never set foot on my property, despite invoices claiming thousands of dollars in work. The judge listened closely, expression unreadable. The bombshell came during the email timeline presentation. Samuel stood at the projector, clicking through a sequence of emails Carla had subpoenaed. Each email was dated, time-stamped, authenticated by digital signatures. The timeline showed Derek coordinating with a secondary lender in Atlanta, trying to use the forged loan agreement to structure refinancing behind my back. The judge leaned forward. Finch tried to object, but Samuel was already 3 steps ahead, citing the chain of custody and court-approved subpoenas. The final slide appeared, Derek Sepp's own words to the lender. Trust deed or not, by the time he realizes what Sepp's happening, it said'll be too late. The courtroom murmured. Derek Sipp's face went pale. The judge turned to Derek directly. Mr. Morgan, she said slowly, did you fabricate or authorize the fabrication of these documents? The ceiling fans hummed above. For a moment time stretched, Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked at Finch, then at the judge, then at the floor. I was advised, he stammered. Answer the question, the judge snapped. His silence was louder than any confession. The ruling was swift. The notice of interest was expunged. The case dismissed with prejudice, meaning Derek couldn't file again, and then came the final hammer blow. The judge referred the matter to the Charleston County Solicitor's Office for potential criminal fraud charges. Finch tried to salvage something, anything. But the judge shut him down. Your client attempted to weaponize forged documents against a legal trust. This is not a misunderstanding. This is fraud. I sat there gripping the edge of the table, listening to the verdict like a man hearing the last nails being driven into a coffin. 6 years of betrayal, intimidation, silence, and strategy had led to this moment. The key bowl at home suddenly came to mind. How many nights I'd stared at it, wondering when the fight would come to a head. It had come, and it had ended exactly where it should have, under oath, under the hum of ceiling fans. With the truth laid bare, Derek walked out of the courthouse a different man. No blazer swagger, no grin. His face was gray, his hands shoved into his pockets. Lily watched him from the hallway, her eyes hard but wet. Megan stood beside me, breathing out slowly. Samuel closed his briefcase. That, he said quietly, was overdue. Carla gave me a rare smile. You built the wall, she said. We just helped you hold it. Outside, the November air was crisp. The courthouse steps were bright with sunlight. I paused at the top, looking out at the city Linda and I had built our life in. For the first time in years, I felt something simple and clean. It wasn't set triumph. It was relief. The fan at home would still be turning when I got back, steady and patient. But now the storm was behind us. And Derek Morgan was finally facing the consequences he'd spent years thinking he could outrun. You said, approved. Next, please strict on word count, don't shorten it. ChatGPT said, Act 9. Rating 10/10, perfect broadcast ready. Word count 932. December 2024 settled over Charleston, like a tide pulling everything quiet after a storm. The courtroom battle was done. The fraud was exposed. Derek Morgan's elaborate scheme had collapsed under its own weight, and now the aftermath was spreading through his life like cracks in cheap concrete. I'd spent years watching him build his house of lies. December was when I got to watch it fall apart, one corner at a time. The first blow came just a week after the trial. December 19th, 2024. Samuel called me early that morning, his tone brisk. Derek Sepp's accounts are frozen, he said. Not just the ones tied to the forged loan, all of them. The solicitor Sepp's office has started their preliminary investigation, and the banks are cooperating. I was standing in the kitchen, coffee mug warm in my hand, ceiling fan turning lazily overhead. Outside, the oak tree was bare, its branches sharp against the winter sky. How bad? I asked. Bad, Samuel replied. They said frozen his LLC accounts and his personal checking. Mortgage lenders are pulling back. His bridge loans are in default. He can juggle anything anymore. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. For 6 years, Derek had lived off leverage, money borrowed against promises he couldn't keep, and finally gravity had arrived. The second blow came from inside his house, or rather from Lily. She moved out on December 21st, 2024, 2 days before Christmas. She didn't tell Derek she was leaving until after she'd packed. Megan and I helped. It was quiet, surgical, done while Derek was meeting with whatever lawyers he could still afford. Her face that morning was a mix of sorrow and steel. She'd spent months combing through his hidden files, testifying against him in court, and finally she'd made the choice to walk away. "I thought marriage meant standing by someone," she said softly as we loaded the last box into Megan Seth's SUV. "But it doesn't just mean standing by fraud." She handed me a small thumb drive before she left. "I found this in his desk last night. You should give it to Carla." Carla later confirmed it contained Derek's notes about potential shell buyers he'd tried to recruit after the injunction froze his accounts, desperate, sloppy, and incriminating. The third blow came from the press. Word of the courtroom decision spread fast through Charleston SEP's legal and real estate circles. A local paper ran the headline on December 23rd. "Forgery scheme dismantled. Charleston man faces fraud probe over property scam." By December 24th, regional news picked it up. Reporters started camping near Derek's subdivision. Someone snapped a photo of him leaving his house in sweatpants, face buried in a hoodie. For years, he'd strutted into family dinners bragging about deals and investors. Now his name was tied to fraud and forgery and black ink. Even his closest business contacts started ghosting him. Megan called me that evening. "Dad, did you see the article?" I had. I'd clipped it and tucked it into my ledger. Not as a trophy, as a record. Every nail, every receipt, every headline, they were part of the structure of this story. Christmas came quietly that year. Just me, Megan, and Lily at the house. A fire crackled in the living room. The ceiling fan turned slowly above us, stirring the warm air. For the first time in a long time, Derek wasn't sitting at the table pretending to belong. His key wasn't in the bowl by the door. That small absence carried more peace than any gift under the tree. Megan poured me a glass of wine. Lily leaned against the banister, looking around the house she grew up in. "It feels different," she said. "It is," I replied. The key bowl by the door held only 3 sets now. Mine, Megan's spare, and Lily's. Nothing extra. No intruder in disguise. I'd spent 6 years defending this house in silence. This Christmas, silence finally meant safety again. Reporters called me after Christmas, asking for statements. I declined. I didn't need to explain my family's betrayal to strangers with notepads. The truth was already public, and Derek's world was shrinking fast without my help. Samuel kept me updated quietly. The solicitor's office was still reviewing the evidence. Carla said Derek's credit lines had collapsed. Investors were demanding repayment, and 2 civil suits had already been filed against his LLCs by lenders who'd been burned. His empire, built on forged signatures and false confidence, had finally hit the ground. On December 30th, 2024, I stood alone on the piazza just before midnight, the city lights reflecting off the water. It was cold but not biting. The ceiling fan inside turned steadily faint through the open door. I leaned against the railing, listening to the silence. For years I'd felt trapped, like Derek's schemes were walls slowly closing in. Now those walls had crumbled, and I could finally breathe inside my own house again. I thought about Linda then, about the way she'd oil the banister in December, humming softly, never missing a spot. She would have hated the ugliness of this fight, but she would have understood why I fought it. The house wasn't just wood and plaster. It was our legacy, and I'd defended it. Derek spent Christmas in silence too, though not by choice. His friends were gone, his accounts were locked, and his reputation was scorched. The man who once tried to steal my house with forged documents was now stuck inside his own crumbling life. I didn't rejoice. I didn't gloat. Justice had its own rhythm, and it had finally caught up to him. Christmas Eve, 2024. Charleston was still that night, unusually so. No wind, no car horns drifting from the battery, no clatter from the cobblestones. Just a quiet that sat heavy, like the city itself was pausing. I walked out to the backyard after dinner. mug of coffee in hand, and stood beneath Linda's oak tree. We'd planted it together in 1989, the year we finished paying off the house. It had grown tall and wide over the decades, roots deep, branches like open arms. The night was cold but not biting. The stars were sharp against the black sky. From the kitchen window I could see the faint spin of the ceiling fan, turning slowly, faithfully, like it had through every betrayal and every late-night strategy session. The house was quiet now, and so was I. It's a strange thing, standing at the end of a war you never wanted to fight. For 6 years I'd lived with Derek Morgan's schemes like a shadow that never quite disappeared. He'd tested every boundary, legal, personal, emotional. He tried to turn my house into his collateral, my silence into his weapon, my family into pawns in a game he thought he'd already won. And for years I let silence be my answer. I thought keeping peace was safer than making war. I thought family bonds were stronger than greed. I was wrong. But standing under that oak tree on Christmas Eve, I understood something. Silence doesn't protect foundations. Megan joined me a few minutes later, wrapping her coat tighter around her. She handed me a small envelope. "Dad," she said, "this came for you earlier, from Samuel." I opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of the court's final recorded order, embossed with the Charleston County seal. It confirmed everything. Derek's notice of interest was permanently expunged. The trust remained unbroken. Legal ownership and control of the property were fully restored. Megan smiled softly. "It sets over," she said. I traced the raised seal with my thumb. "Yeah," I whispered, "it is." Later that night, after Megan and Lily had gone home, I walked through the house room by room. The study still held the corkboard where I'd mapped Derek's schemes like battle plans. The key bowl by the door was tidy. Just 3 sets now. My ledgers sat on the desk, pages full of dates, receipts, overheard calls, filings, threats, and victories. I stopped at the kitchen table where it had all started, the night Derek slid that forged loan agreement across the island like a loaded weapon. I remembered the smell of the wood polish, the angle of the late afternoon light, the casual arrogance in his voice when he called my home a gold mine. Back then I'd laughed. I'd trusted family to mean safety. Now, I understood trust isn't a wall, it's a door, and you'd better know who you hand the keys to. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat at the table, listening to the house. The fan turned above me, soft and steady. "You didn't lose me, Derek," I said aloud, voice calm in the empty kitchen. "You gave me away." The words didn't come from anger. They came from clarity. Because the truth is, I didn't change Derek. I couldn't. His greed had always been there, waiting for opportunity. What changed was me. I'd stopped being the man who believed silence would keep the peace. I'd become the man who built walls, laid legal foundations, and fought back with facts, patience, and strategy. I'd gone from grieving widower to builder again, not of houses this time, but of defenses. The oak tree outside creaked softly in the winter air. Linda used to say that trees tell you everything if you just stand still long enough. I stood still for too long after she passed. Derek used that stillness like a crowbar. But trees survive storms not because they stand perfectly still, but because their roots are deep. Foundations don't fail in storms. They fail in silence. And I said finally stopped being silent. I went back to the study and opened my ledger to the very first page. December 2018. That was the night Samuel and I recorded the trust. The night I thought I was closing a door on future problems. Instead, it had been the prologue. On the last page, I wrote one final line with my Carpenter Sips pencil. December 24th, 2024, Legacy Defended. I underlined it twice. People like Derek think revenge means fire and spectacle. But real revenge, the kind that settles deep, isn't about screaming in their face. It's about methodically, patiently, lawfully dismantling the very structures they built to harm you. It's about living in the house they tried to steal, and hearing nothing but the quiet hum of a fan. It's about standing beneath an oak tree on Christmas Eve and knowing you didn't just protect a house, you protected a legacy. The night grew colder, but I stayed outside a while longer, staring at the house Linda and I built. It didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt solid. The storm had passed. The walls held, and Derek Morgan was just a name in court records now. A footnote in a story that ended exactly where it began in my home. Under the fan, beneath the oak tree. Quiet, steady, unbroken.